Now, on Tuesday night, the College Football Playoff Committee will be revealing their rankings for the first time this season. So we thought this would be the perfect time to switch over from doing a regular top 25 to doing what the bracketology would look like right now after 10 weeks of the college football season. So let's go over the first 4 teams that have buys, and that is Oregon at number 1, Georgia at number 2, Miami at number 3, and BYU at number 4. For anyone who's wondering, why is Ohio State not in the top 4? What does that mean? It's just that the 4 highest ranked conference champions get a bye. So obviously with the Power 4, most likely it's going to be whoever wins the Power 4 conferences. So those are the 4 highest ranked teams, obviously from each conference, the SEC, the Big 10, the Big 12, and ACC. That's the 4 teams that get a bye. So it's not necessarily like the playoff anymore. Just rank the teams no matter what. It depends on conferences now as well. Let's go over to the matchups that we'll see there as well. Number 5, Ohio State will be playing number 12, Boise State for us right now. Number 6, Texas against number 11, Alabama. Number 7, Penn State against number 10, Notre Dame. And number 8, Indiana at number 9, Tennessee. And keep in mind, the higher-ranked team will be hosting that first-round playoff game as well. And Boise State, while maybe not is going to be a top 12 team in the PFF top 25, again, I want to remind people that there are the 5 highest-ranked conference champions get into the field, which means the top group of 5 champion will be getting in, and right now that would be Boise State as well. So that's why Boise State gets into the playoff. But Dalton, well, actually, before we do that, let's go to the first 4 out as well. The first 4 teams that just missed out on being in this mix: SMU, Texas A&M, LSU, and Ole Miss were the first 4 teams that just missed out on being a part of bracketology. And obviously, a very long way to go the rest of the year. But those are the teams that are right outside the mix right now. What stands out to you, though, in what would the playoff look like right now going into week 11?
I think especially with the Texas A&M loss last night, we'll start in the top 4. Yeah, I think Georgia. It's funny because of the 4 conferences. Let me start here. The SEC actually has the least clarity.
Yeah,
we have no idea, especially until next week when we get Bama and LSU playing, Georgia and Ole Miss playing. Out now, A&M's got to play Texas, and we have zero clarity in the SEC at all. I think the other 3, Oregon, they're pretty much a shoo-in to make the Big Ten title game. Miami's getting there with the ACC title game. BYU has a very good inside track with the rest of their schedule. But the SEC, Georgia's there. That could change week to week. I think we have no idea what's going to happen because every single team, I think, is a little bit more flawed than we thought they were, right? Especially maybe Ole Miss is now getting hot enough to go and overtake it, or maybe the winner of LSU-Bama springboards themselves into that spot. I think the SEC right now is the most wide-ranging, maybe even fascinating race when you have all of this. I think it starts in the first 4, and I think it's incredibly murky. I think the other conferences, we're going, okay, in the Big Ten, there's 3 or 4. In the ACC, we've already almost narrowed it down to the 2, as long as they don't lose the rest of the way. BYU, we like the inside track, and we know the other 3 fighting for it. The SEC, that's a mess.
Yeah,
that's an absolute mess in the SEC right now, especially at the top with all the upsets we've seen and everything we've seen. There's some good teams even in the middle, right? We talk about South Carolina and Vandy and Kentucky a lot because these are teams that can give. They have pulled these upsets. They can give these other teams problems. So I'm curious to see where that all gets handled with the SEC through the whole process. But it starts right at the top. It's Georgia for the moment. It could be anybody else next week.
I feel solid about Georgia being the top-ranked SEC team right now. But like I said, Texas is still up there. You still got Tennessee. You still got Alabama. And obviously the first 4 out, 3 of them are SEC teams, right? You got A&M, LSU, Ole Miss. It's still wide open in that conference right now. There's some great matchups, though, that we got.
Oh, you know Quinn Ewers wants that again.
Oh, yeah, Texas, Alabama.
You already know he wants Bama again. If there's any playoff game that Quinn Ewers is going to go and play the best game of his career, it'll be against Alabama because that's what he does.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That would be hilarious, actually. I did not even think about that. That'd be really funny.
The other interesting one here for me, we were talking about this a little bit yesterday, is Indiana. Mm-hmm. And Indiana right now is sitting there at number 8. There is a world, okay? Can I throw you the craziest bizarro world that we have here with Indiana? There is a world that we get to Selection Sunday, right? And Indiana's the number 1 team in the country.
Yep.
They've got Michigan next week, big game. Got Ohio State coming. Purdue, they shouldn't lose to Purdue. And then if they beat Ohio State and they run the table 12-0, they're going to be playing Oregon in the Big Ten title game. And at that point, after beating Ohio State, they might be like number 2 or 3 in the country. And if they beat Oregon, they're probably going to be number 1. There is a world. We're 4 games away.
They will be number 1.
There's a real world where Indiana walks into the playoff as a number 1 team in the country. It's entirely possible. I think if they lose to Ohio State, then we have a different case of like 11-1. I still think they should get in at that point.
Probably,
they've dominated anybody else. But there is an actual world here where they are like number 2 or 3 going into the Big Ten title game if they get there, if they beat Ohio State. And then if they beat Oregon, they'd be the number 1 team in the country.
The only thing that scares me, and I agree, they probably should still get an 11-1. And I know they dominate every game, but if they lose to Ohio State, especially if it's convincingly, then it's like, okay, who are they beat? Then the argument is like, oh, who are they beating? I still think they get in over some 10-2 teams, but that's the problem is that you start to run into, okay, their wins
But they've won, what is it? Every game. The closest one was Washington by 17.
Yeah.
And yesterday they're down 10-0 and they score 47 unanswered.
That's the argument is that they've blown out everyone.
You're blowing out every. And I don't see many scenarios where Ohio State just goes and dog walks them. I don't see that at all. I think Indiana has a legitimate shot to go in there and win that game, especially what we've seen from Ohio State the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's going to be an insane race, man. I mean, just Oregon, Georgia, Miami, BYU is the first 4 buys. It's just insane. It's just insane what we have in college football right now. And then look at those matchups, man. Penn State, Notre Dame, that's a great historic matchup with those 2 programs right there. Ohio State, Boise State with Ashton Ginty going up against the Buckeyes would be really fun as well. That Indiana-Tennessee game, I mean, Eli would probably be really nervous about that game going into it.
It should be.
Yeah,
that's real. I'm going to tell you, of all the surprise teams that we've seen so far, we've seen Pitt, we've seen Arizona State, we've seen Iowa, we've seen some other. I think the 2 that are in this, BYU and Indiana, are the 2 most real ones. This is not fairy tale. This is not fluke. These are 2 really good football teams that are going to stay, at the very least, deep in this mix the rest of the way.
And there's a Tennessee offense is not really executing all that well, and the Indiana offense is executing really well.
Right this minute, I would pick Indiana to win.
Yeah, that's a really, really fun game. Dalton.
Sorry, Eli.
So those are the games, just to remind people, this is what it should be right now. Obviously, a lot can change. Is there anything that, like, jumping out to you, like any team that's not in that top 12 that you think, okay, at the end of the year, they will be in there?
I found it interesting, that debate between SMU and Alabama there at 11. Because SMU with the 1 loss only to BYU, Alabama lost to Vandy.
Bama beat Georgia.
They did. It's the tweener of what is it your record? Is it your losses? Is it what is? I think SMU's still some work to do here.
They beat Georgia and South Carolina, who South Carolina's going to be ranked now probably.
Getting such a big win last night, though, for SMU in such convincing fashion. I think that's going to be that weird cross-conference case of how do we measure these things? Is 10-2 SEC better than 11-1 or 11-2 ACC? We're going to be there's going to be a lot of strength of schedule and sort of arguments like that. SMU is the team that jumps out to me there.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I think SMU has definitely a great shot at making it, but I just right now just looking at Alabama, what they've done, like killing Missouri, who's still a top 25 team. Lost to Tennessee, who's a top 10 team right now. Lost to Vanderbilt, who's an argument to be a top 25 team. They beat South Carolina, who's a top 25 team, and obviously beating Georgia, who's the number 2 team in the country. That's a big one as well. So I think that ultimately was the reason why, but it's close. It definitely was close for the 2. I agree. SMU is definitely up there. And obviously, anything in the SEC could happen as well. I mean, LSU still is going to.
And you got 2 teams sitting right there with LSU and Ole Miss, and then obviously with Bama and Georgia in it. I mean, those are. What kind of is there more of a definition of a must-win game than what those 2 have next week?
Yeah, and then I mean Iowa State, Kansas State, Colorado. Look, if they beat BYU, like they're obviously in it, and they're a top 4 seed as well, most likely. At least if Boise State doesn't jump them and get into the top 4 as well. And then I mean Army is still in the mix for the group of 5 race. Like it is still a wide open race.
I counted like 2 weeks ago. I had it at like 38 or 39 teams alive when I was doing it on a board at home, and I think I'm down to about 26 or 27.
I think I might start doing an article every week of just who's alive right now
we might have
in
to
the
do
playoff
that.
race.
Yeah.
That'd be really fun.